of World Culture in Santa Barbara. It's a beautiful summer solstice day, and we're so pleased that you could come. Today we're honoring the self-transformation, a spiritual journey of AA's 12 steps. And this promises to be a really delightful evening for all of us. The Institute of World Culture is a nonprofit educational organization dedicated to lifelong learning in the promotion of universal brotherhood. And we're located here in Santa Barbara, California, and our presentation tonight will be recorded and presented on YouTube, so an international audience can experience the wisdom.
Pshaw.
So my name is Kim Miller, and I'm serving as chair for today's event. And after I introduce Brian, I'll go sit down, and then we'll have questions afterwards. So you can hold your questions for the end of the presentation. Information regarding the Institute can be found at the back table there. There is a blue program, or a blue card that shows the wonderful aims of the Institute. And they're really good seeds for contemplation. If you ever just are wanting to read something inspirational, just take this and read one of them and contemplate it. More information about this is found on the Institute's website, worldculture.org. Today's presentation particularly focuses on aim number 6 in the Institute of World Culture's Declaration of Interdependence. Aim 6 says, to promote forums for fearless inquiry and constructive dialogue concerning the frontiers of science, the therapeutics of self-transformation, and the societies of the future. Our main speaker today is Brian, with his last name indicated with a B, as according to the 12-step program. So Brian B., I'm going to let you take over. We're very excited to hear about how you got the idea for this program.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to start with that.
Thank you, Kim, and I'm so glad that everyone is here tonight. Yes, my name is Brian, and I was talking with Kim for a few minutes before the meeting tonight, and she asked me, well, Brian, what was the seed for this presentation? And actually, half of it was born in this room. Many months ago, my friend Joe Miller made a presentation on Songs of Concord, which was a commission that he and Kim made to composer locally Phyllis E. Zimmerman. And I watched Joe sit up here and speak so eloquently about his work with Phyllis and those words that she set to music. So I was really enriched by that. And then I think following that, we had a little get together at our house with some of the singers from that program. And we were talking, and Joe just kind of offhandedly said, oh, you know, AA, I just don't get it. And if you know anything about Joe, Joe is a well-learned and very well-read. He explores a lot of things, and so for him to say anything like, I just don't get it, was, I have to fix that, or at least I have to do my part in helping Joe come to a better understanding about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you, Joe, for inspiring this talk. And Kim's back.
And I'm back because this is the first time I've been a chair, and I forgot to actually introduce the speaker other than say his name. Isn't that clever? So, Brian was raised here in Santa Barbara, and he went to UCSB and received a degree in global studies.
Phi Beta Kappa.
Wow, that's impressive. And he has been having a variety of interesting opportunities for employment. He's worked for the Santa Barbara Middle School, teaching students how to repair their bicycles as they go on long extended trips all by themselves, and he's been supporting that activity for many years, the bike trip staff. He's a teacher of marketing for adults. He's done that for 5 years. He's the president of a nutritional supplement company, and he's the CEO of Andrea's Seafood Company in Ventura.
Ah, big fans out there. I like
Yes.
that. Yay.
And even more important, what gives him joy is to be a singer for many, many years. He has sung for All Saints by the Sea Church and for Trinity Episcopal Church. He's a wonderful tenor and bass. He's bisectional, he says. He can do either one. And oh gosh, that's how I met him as a singer. He's just an amazing. I hope you sing something.
I'm not sure that that's on the program for this evening.
Okay, so here you go.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Well, speaking of acknowledgments and thanks, let me just make sure that this clicks over here. Yes, thank you, Kim, for that warm introduction and for supporting me in this project. I appreciate your effort and energy in that regard. And all the IWC folks that I've known over the years, I've been kind of Institute of World Culture adjacent for many years. One of my first teachers with a capital T was Ken Ferguson. I've also had Russ as one of my teachers, Russ Lewin, and Joe, of course, and Robbie and Jim Tepfer. I've known them for many years, so really excited to be here speaking with you today. I'm also here thanks to a group of guys that are known as the Baffled Lot. You know who you are. Also my lovely family. My wife is here supporting me tonight. And really my higher power, because without a close relationship with my higher power, I would not be here today sharing with you the things that I've learned about this program. So speaking of this program, I must say that the opinions that I'm going to share with you are mine and mine alone. I am not an official spokesperson of any program, philosophy, institution, or anything like that. I'm just a guy, and while I've done my best to stay close to the source material for today's presentation, it is presented through my own eyes, my own ears, through my own experience. And so please don't take what I'm saying as the literal gospel, so to speak. I'm very much sharing this from my own experience, and it's expressed, of course, in conjunction with my own ego. That was a joke. And so also some of the things that I'm going to be quoting are from the book of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, and it was penned in the early 20th century. And so some of the quotes, and especially around pronouns, expressions about higher power and God, are all informed by that time. So we might have a different understanding now in the early years of the 21st century. So please just take that with a grain of salt if you find something. One of the things that I've learned through the program is to kind of look for the commonalities, look for the similarities, instead of trying to focus on the things that are different or the things that I have a challenge with. So I'd implore you to approach this with the same kind of sensitivity. Speaking of sources, I do have quite a bit of material that I'm going to be presenting tonight. Primary source is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Since it was penned in the 1930s, the first 164 pages of this volume have remained the same. There is a collection of stories at the back that has changed over the years as sensibilities and culture has changed. However, the first 164 pages of this book are the same. There's another book that I refer to in this presentation. It's called The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. It's a companion volume to this book. It kind of goes more into detail around the steps and the traditions themselves. And so anybody who's studying this would be very well advised to check out that book. There's also an unpublished volume that I used, I need to acknowledge, called The Works. The Works is a collection, it's basically a study guide for the 12 steps. So I've used a lot of that material in this as well. And of course my own experience, strength, and hope. So I hope that you get to enjoy that. We are going to go on a spiritual journey tonight. We're going to go and imagine someone from their deepest depths of their experience. I'm going to use the words pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Mm-hmm. And those words represent a feeling, a place where people who have this problem go in their souls, in their minds. And so we're going to go from there, and we're going to get rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence during this talk right here in the next 90 minutes. Are you ready? So it's going to be imperfect. There's no way, whole books and seminars and weekend seminars could be used to explain this and go into depth about this. We're not going to be able to cover this with that kind of detail. However, it is my goal to get through the material covering all of the 12 steps in the presentation tonight. Are you ready?
Yep, we're ready.
Okay, so go ahead and turn next to the person that's next to you and say, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, if you're ready, I'm ready. So back to the original genesis for this talk. What is Alcoholics Anonymous? Joe Miller, I don't get it. Well, let's look at a paragraph that'll tell us what Alcoholics Anonymous is. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. So this kind of breaks down into three components here. We've got a fellowship. That is a group of people, much like IWC is a fellowship. You have church fellowships. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people. And what do? They share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. And why do they do this? Why do they get together? Well, it's to solve their common problem and to help others to recover from alcoholism. And so we want to think about here, I think the best way to start this out is to start talking about the problem, because it is the thing that's common among people in Alcoholics Anonymous. And in order to illustrate that, I'm going to use some stories. One of the things, if you've ever had the opportunity to attend a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that people share exactly that, their experience, strength, and hope with each other. And what we find is that the differences, the details in our stories are different, and yet at the core, our experience remains the same. There's also some things that we can communicate about where we are in our spiritual journeys through story. You know, Jesus told a lot of parables. There's fables. Story is a great way to communicate more than just the words. There's an underlying subtext. There's an underlying message that happens and can be communicated very well when we use story. And so I'm going to share 3 stories today that hopefully will help to illustrate what the problem is. We okay? Give me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
All right. Oh darn, I'm interactive, I'm sorry. It just is part of my thing. I will interact with you and try and keep the energy up. The first story we're going to talk about is the story of Alcoholics Anonymous founder Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson was born in Vermont. Oh, and by the way, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill's story is the entire first chapter. It takes about 12 pages. And I'm not going to read it to you verbatim, okay? Because that would take up the first 10 minutes or the second 10 minutes of my talk. But what I will do is I will talk to you about the overview of his experience and what kind of led to forming of Alcoholics Anonymous. So Bill was born in Vermont. He was commissioned as an artillery officer in World War I. He developed there his talent for leadership and his taste for liquor. After the war, Bill came back and he kind of resolved to prove to everybody that he was important. He had a commission in the army and came back and pursued success on Wall Street. And with that success, his drinking grew progressively more troublesome. Unhappy scenes at home, arguments with friends, and then devastated by the 1929 stock crash, Bill fled to Canada where he had a friend that had some money, and he lived there for a time as well until drinking cost him his job. Bill was able to, or unfortunately, progress through the characteristic stages of alcoholism. 3 to 4 bottles of bathtub gin a day brought him to the brink of mental and physical collapse. Realizing that his drinking was preventing him from reaching his goal, he resolved to stop altogether, and then found that he could not. He was baffled as to why he could not stop drinking, even though he desperately wanted to. He began to be caught up in the endless cycle of drinking to relieve severe withdrawal symptoms, which quickly made matters worse. Bill checked into the hospital, the Charles B. Towns Hospital, to be treated for alcohol addiction. Here he learned of one of AA's earliest friends, Dr. Silkworth, of the theory of the allergy that alcohol has on some certain people that maybe explained why his willpower could not control his drinking. As an aside here, one of the theories about alcohol and the way that it's presented in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it is both an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. Something different happens to people who are alcoholics when they consume alcohol. It's called the phenomenon of craving. How many of you have enjoyed Pringles in your life? The potato chips? The slogan is, bet you can't have just one. And if you've ever found yourself just kind of grabbing into the bowl of potato chips because it tastes good, because it does something into your mind or something like that, you have, or sugar, maybe whatever it is, maybe you felt that phenomenon of craving. Well, for people who are alcoholics, you have that phenomenon of craving, but it destroys your life. I mean, I can laugh about it because I'm on the other side of all this. But you can imagine what would happen if somebody had a drink and then they couldn't stop drinking it, and in fact it would, wreck their life and their relationships and things like that. So that's the theory of allergy. That is, the body of an alcoholic has a different reaction to alcohol than other people have. So once Bill learned about this theory of the allergy, he thought that this knowledge would enable him to remain abstinent. And he, suffering from the common alcoholic delusion that a lengthy dry spell would enable him to control his drinking, Bill began to drink again. Further trips to the hospital and Dr. Silkworth's assessment of his condition convinced Bill that he was in a hopeless state. And in the book, you can read about Bill's story about how he stops working, but his wife goes to get a job, which in the 1920s, 1930s was very irregular. Bill was unable to hold down employment. He would steal money from his wife's purse to go out drinking while she was at work. Things got really bad. Moved in with her folks. He had a very bad time of it. When we look at Bill's story, it kind of illustrates what happens if somebody is an alcoholic. At first, it's fun. I had, and other people have, a really good time at first when we begin to drink alcohol. However, it begins to take a progressively more important role in our lives. And when I talk about that, I begin to talk about the mental obsession. That is, when I'm not drinking, it's pretty much all that I can think about. And when I am drinking, I'm pretty much going to oblivion. That place where you lose consciousness, you're without your senses. It's a very challenging place to be. So we adjust our activities to manage our drinking. Maybe we get a different job, maybe we get a different relationship. We change our lives, the circumstances of our lives, to meet our needs to continue to drink alcohol. But we still feel like we're in control, and we start trying to keep control, but we lose control. We try and quit or cut down, switch from scotch to brandy, drink only natural wines, all kinds of tricks to try and keep it going, but in the end, it doesn't work. When we repeatedly fail despite our best efforts, our hope of recovery is destroyed. And Bill in his story tells us how it was for him, how he found the solution, and what his life was like after applying the solution. We're going to talk about the solution for most of our talk tonight. There's another story in the big book about a guy named Jim, and this one I'm going to read to you because it's really concise and talks all about these things I've been talking about, the problem of alcoholism. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He had a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. He's an intelligent man, normal so far as we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated that he had to be committed. On leaving the asylum, he came into contact with us. We told him what we knew of alcoholism and the answer we had found. He made a beginning. His family was reassembled, and he began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well for a time, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. To his consternation, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. He agreed he was a real alcoholic and in serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum if he kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, for whom he had a deep affection. Yet he got drunk again. We asked him to tell us exactly how it happened. This is his story. I came to work on Tuesday morning. I remember I felt irritated that I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned. I had a few words with the boss, but nothing serious. Then I decided to drive into the country and see one of my prospects for a car. On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I would get a sandwich. I also had a notion that I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar, for I had been going to it for years. I had eaten there many times during the months I was sober. I sat down at a table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk. Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk. Suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. I vaguely sensed I was not being any too smart, but felt reassured as I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. The experiment went so well that I ordered another whiskey and poured it into more milk. That didn't seem to bother me, so I tried another. Thus started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. Here was the threat of commitment, the loss of family and position, to say nothing of that intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only ordered with milk. It's quite a story, isn't it? But this happens every day all the time. Continuing from the big book, our behavior is absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap, having queer ideas of fun. Well, luck then deserts him and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he's hit again, and this time he has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he has decided to stop jaywalking for good, but in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he could no longer work. His wife gets a divorce and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? You may think this illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, this illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but might it be true? So these observations about this jaywalker, about Jim, about Bill, would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Does that make sense? Unless I get a drink in my hand, have a swallow, I'm not going to get drunk. I'm not going to have any of these problems. So the issue with the alcoholic centers in his or her mind. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, or maybe just the night before. we are without defense against the first drink. So I hope that these stories have kind of painted the picture of someone who starts out maybe drinking like everybody else, have some fun at college, have some fun after work, but over time, this allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind begins to take over and has really drastic deleterious effects on their life. And really, the alcoholic who is a true alcoholic does not have the power themselves to stop. It's a really sad state. So, the good news is that there is a solution, and it's worked for hundreds of thousands of people, friends of mine included, who have basically gotten relief from this previously hopeless situation of body and mind. And so what we're going to do now is we are going to begin the journey of the 12 steps. And I hope I've set the stage for someone who has basically thought that things are so bad that going to an AA meeting sounds like a good idea. It's really pretty bad. Well, step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And for someone who's in this position that I have explained to you, tried to illustrate pretty clearly, admitting that we're powerless over alcohol hopefully has sunk in at that point. Hopefully they've got the idea that maybe once I've started, I can't stop, and I can't stop thinking about it. The second part of this is that our lives have become unmanageable. And this is actually the more difficult part of this contemplation, of this thought to come to realize or come to accept. The alcohol part's easy to admit, the unmanageable life part not so much. There's a great image in the book, Big Book, that talks about how we as maybe humans, but certainly as alcoholics, want to be the director and the lighting director and the choreographer and the script writer in so many parts of our lives. And what we find is that that is something that has caused us to drink, because we want to be in control. We want to be in control of what you think about me, of the way that you respond to me. And at the end of the day, the distilled part of this is that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our problem, and alcohol is but a symptom. So it's very challenging for someone to get to the place where they understand that their life has become unmanageable. And the process of doing this is actually to take a look back, even very recently, and examine all the things that happened in our lives over which we have no control. And you can imagine a few things on your way over here. I tried to turn left on Sola Street off of De La Vina Street, and I was unable to do that. And that was completely out of my control, and I had a little bit of a reaction to that. It was not that big, but just one little thing on the way over here. Imagine all the different things in our lives over which we have no control. And this is said to be the one step that has to be done perfectly all the time. I have to understand that I have no power over alcohol, and that my life has become unmanageable as a result, and is continuing to be unmanageable. I'll think about those things over which I have control, and those things over which I have no control, and I'll tell you, one circle of things is much smaller than the other. So once we've established that our lives have become unmanageable and that we're powerless over alcohol, we're going to move to step 2. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This is also a compound phrase, and we're going to break this down into 3 parts. Came to believe, is one part, that a power greater than ourselves, second part, could restore us to sanity. So a good way of explaining this is actually going to be to take it backwards. So let's take a look at the definition of insanity. A deranged state of mind, usually occurring as a specific disorder, such unsoundness of mind or lack of understanding as prevents one from entering into relationships, legal status, transactions, extreme folly or unreasonableness, something utterly foolish or unreasonable. A popular definition of this is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And often for the alcoholic, this manifests itself in trying to switch from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever with and without a solemn oath, all the things that we try to do to make it different this time. Take your whiskey with a glass of milk. If we're truthful to ourselves, we can see that as far as it pertains to alcohol, we have been insane. Let's go to the middle part, that a power greater than ourselves. One of the formative stories in the Big Book is after we heard about Bill going through his life and basically ending up in his home surrounded by a bunch of bathtub gin bottles, Bill gets a phone call from his pal, Ebby. And Ebby calls Bill and says, "I found religion, I'm coming right over." Now, Ebby was a guy that Bill used to drink with, one of his old drinking buddies. In fact, they had once chartered a plane to go off on some drunken adventure. Well, Ebby comes in and says, "Bill, I've got religion." And for those of you who like to study spiritual movements, things like that, Ebby had recently come into contact with a group called the Oxford Group. The Oxford Group in the early 20th century was all about righting oneself. It was a spiritual movement, and they had managed to get Bill's friend Ebby sober. And so Bill's talking with Ebby and Bill says, "No, I don't know about this God thing. I don't know if I can do that." And Ebby turns to Bill and says, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" And for people who have had a hard time with maybe religion or certainly with morality, things that have been explained to them, this is a completely novel concept and still remains very challenging for a lot of people even to this day. But the idea that someone could unlearn the things that they had learned before that no longer served them and began to choose their own concept of God was revolutionary, especially when it came time for Alcoholics Anonymous in its infancy. I have a friend of mine, Michael, whose sponsor said to him when Michael was complaining about the God thing, he said, "Well, why don't you just choose something to pray to and then pray to it?" Michael said, "Okay." Oftentimes people who don't have a relationship or background with religion, they will use the group as their higher power. The group has done the steps, they are at meetings. Some other people will say, "Okay, well, what does God stand for? Good, orderly direction, or group of drunks." All I know is that it isn't me. And when I say me, I know that the me here has many different parts. And what I'm talking about here is I know it's not my egoic self. I know it's not my lower self. There are parts of me that I believe are connected to each one of you and also to the great realm of ideas, or whatever you want to call that big thing, Atman, or whatever it is. That's not what I'm talking about here. That is kind of what I'm talking about. It's not me, meaning that I have to understand that I have to divorce my ego from my notion of my higher power. I can't identify my ego with my higher power anymore, because it was the selfishness and the self-centeredness that got me into all the trouble in the first place. So why don't you choose your own concept of God was revolutionary and allows people to actually enter into a relationship with spirit that works for them. Not something that was told or offered or pounded into someone's head, but instead one that works through their own experience, one that works for them instead of being told to them. I can tell you from my own experience, this opened up doors for me that I had never seen before and continues to through my work with the 11th step or meditation. So the third part of step 2, came to believe. So for most people, this coming to believe that a power greater than themselves could restore them to sanity is a process. This is something that happens over a long period of time. There are some people who are struck with what you might call a white light experience. Bill's story includes one of these, where one moment things are one way, they have a fantastic realization, and then the next moment things are different. I was an educational variety, come to believe. It took me a long time. And even when I heard you talking about, or people in the meetings talking about, a God that worked for them, oh, that might work okay for you, but for me, that's not good. That doesn't work for me. So it just took a long time for me to get something that worked. Through hearing people's stories. Again, stories come up, hearing what things used to be like, what happened, and then what is it like now. In thinking about restoring us to sanity, these are a list of things, the bedevilments they're called on page 52 of the big book, that really characterize the life of someone who is in the throes of alcoholism. In looking at this list, I'm not going to read them here. You could probably imagine that this is not a great way to live. But it characterizes many people who, day after day, no longer have the choice of whether or not they use alcohol. They prioritize it over their relationships, they prioritize it over their jobs, they prioritize it over their health. These are really serious afflictions of the spirit and of the body and the mind. And so, having contemplated all these things as someone who's beginning to get used to the idea that they're an alcoholic, we come to step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. And talking about a decision versus a choice, in the root of the word decision is it's like a cut. Nothing is ever the same after that. Something dies after a decision. Maybe it's an opportunity, a door closes, things like that. And so what this step really to me is talking about is choosing a new way of life. That is one that's in alignment with my higher power, one that's in alignment with spirit, one that's in alignment with good orderly direction. Agathon, the top of the pyramid. Those are the things that's this decision. This is the way it's going to be. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to spirit or to God. To the care of God as we understood God. These words are very important. It doesn't ask you to trust someone else's version of a higher power. It asks you to set aside whatever you've been taught about God and start over. It requires you to figure out for yourself what kind of God and higher power makes sense to you. What concept of God might make sense to you? I really like this quote by Richard Rohr, Christian mystic, 20th century. Suffering is the only thing strong enough to destabilize the imperial ego. Suffering. This here is the suffering. It has to be led to the edge of its own resources. I give up. I raise the white flag. So it learns to call upon the deeper resource of who it truly is, which is the God self, the true self, the Christ self, the Buddha self. Use the words that you want. It is who we are in God and who God is in us. At this place, you are indestructible. And what that means to me is that when I'm in touch with my higher power, when I'm in touch with the source at the universe, the center of the universe, I can go anywhere, do anything, because it's all going to be okay, no matter what happens. I have friends that have lost their wives, lost their jobs, gotten sick, had their children die, and it all ends up being okay because through these steps they have created this connection, a conscious connection with their higher power, and it serves to fuel them and give them what they need to make it through anything. And so with the third step, there's actually a prayer that is said that helps us to make this decision. And I'll say it now. God, I offer myself to thee. to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help, of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And so in about 20 minutes, we have gone from someone who is at the end of their rope. Their resources have been exhausted. They don't know what to do. They turn to Alcoholics Anonymous, the last house on the block. And through the power of story and contemplating some certain ideas, they've come to understand that they're powerless over alcohol, their lives are unmanageable. They believe that connecting with spirit can restore them to sanity. And here at step 3, they make a decision that after saying this, their life is never going to be the same, and they're committing themselves to the service of their higher power. So in practicality, how long can that take? Days, weeks, months, years, never. We've covered it in about 20 minutes. And you can imagine somebody who's in this predicament, has acquired this peculiar twist in their mind where they no longer have choice over alcohol, the use of alcohol, has gotten to this place where it doesn't work. It might work for you, but it's not going to work for me. To maybe this will work for me. I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to make a decision to do this. Okay. So the first 2 steps, step 1 and step 2, they're contemplative. They require thought and understanding and coming to a certain place mentally. This is an action. So we look at, again, the word here, made a decision. It's the first time that we've actually taken some action here in the step of Alcoholics Anonymous, 12 steps. The remaining steps are all action steps. Can everybody just stand up for a second? Give each other a high five and say, hey, we made it to step 3. Give each other a high five. All right, give a little stretch. Give a little stretch. That's good. I'll give you a high five. Air high five. There we go. Good. Okay, so now the remaining steps, you may sit down. Thank you. A state change is important from time to time. We're going a long distance here, and I want to make sure that we can all hang with it. All right, so, and in fact, it should be just about as quick as that, because once one has made a decision to turn their will and their life over to the care of God as they understand them, you got some power, you've got some energy, you've got some safety. You're kind of wearing the cloak now of your higher power. You're within their care. So you don't want to wait too long before you start on the work. And the work, we're going to illustrate the work here. The first step, step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us from God. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. The inventory is described as a fact-finding and fact-facing process. We are seeking the truth about ourselves and honestly taking stock of our lives. We are to search out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Through the Big Book, it is stated that selfishness and self-centeredness and self were the root of our troubles. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We were defeated by our ego. We considered its common manifestations. These common manifestations are grouped in 4 categories. We're going to get real practical here, folks. Resentments, fear, sex relationships, and people we have hurt. Each of these common manifestations is treated separately in the inventory. All right, resentments, the first group. The number 1 offender. From these thoughts or mental attitudes stem all forms of spiritual disease, we say. We are instructed to list all people, institutions, or principles with whom we are angry or have resentments. What is resentment? Resentment is a feeling of indignant displeasure or persistent ill will at something felt as a result of a real or imagined wrong done. In summary, we are dealing with a negative or unpleasant thought or feeling caused or generated by the real or imagined act or failure to act of a person, institution, or principle. It is important to realize that when we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. So when I think about resentments, I think about it like, I think the resentiment is kind of the word that I use. Whenever I have my cassette tape of what happened, or my VHS, remember VHS? I rewind the tape and I feel that thing again. And every time that I feel that thing again, guess what happens? The volume on my part gets a little lower, and the volume on the other person's part gets a little higher. And so when I feel or think about that thing that happened again and again and again as I'm driving down the street, as I'm typing on my computer, the resentment grows, my part in it diminishes, and the other person's part or institution increases. So at the end of the day, or at the end of the thought, all of a sudden it's their big problem. They are the ones that are the problem. So let's take a look at what this inventory looks like. We actually write this down on pieces of paper, and I've thought better about bringing my notebooks in, but I still have them. It is oftentimes suggested to burn it, but I have not done that. So it is as plain and simple as this. You make a list of people and institutions against whom you have resentments. Like Fred, my brother. My brother is not named Fred, by the way. Marge, my boss. This is definitely not Marge. My boss is not named Marge. So you write their name down. Imagine a big piece of paper. All the people against whom you have a resentment. And it goes over many, many, many pages. People actually do this. The cause, why am I resentful? Well, Fred, my brother, smashed my birthday cake when I was 11. I'd be pretty angry about that. Something I have on my list against my brother. Marge yelled at me in front of all my coworkers. So then we start to look at the effect. How did that event affect me? And there's actually quite a list of ways it can affect us and our ego that I'm going to show on the next slide. But imagine Fred, my brother, smashed my birthday cake. It affected my self-esteem. All my friends were there. I wanted to look good. And I didn't trust him when he was carrying the cake toward me. Instead, he smashed it. So I don't know how to trust him anymore. Marge yelled at me in front of all my coworkers. It affected my self-esteem because I felt diminished, because I just stopped looking good. And am I going to get fired or get a demerit or whatever it is? It's going to affect my financial security. So in thinking about, again, imagining your own life, all the things, people, institutions against whom you have resentments right now, imagine writing that list. Well, this is part of the work. These are the different ways it can affect us. They affect our self-esteem, our pocketbook, my ambition, personal relationships, keep me from looking good. That's a big one, by the way. If I'm not looking good, I'm really resentful. Trust, physical security, emotional security, need for control, my value system, things like that. So now you've got a list of people. Of course, there's many more than just two there, but this is part of the inventory. Now you see we've got this thing over here that's blank. And there's a reason why we do these things in order. We do them column by column. It's much easier to write a list of names than it is for me to think about Frank or Fred and all the reasons why I'm bummed out at Fred. I just go down the rabbit hole. So I'm actually going to write down the whole list of names first, then I'm going to go back and write down 2 or 3 things about each person or institution against whom I have a resentment. And then I'm going to think about how it affects me. Now we come to the 4th column, which is my part. Remember when I had the VHS tape and my part went down and everybody else's part went up? Now I need to honestly look at those situations and say, well, what was my part in it? Well, earlier that day, I made fun of Fred and embarrassed him in front of all my friends. That was my part in why he smashed my cake. Marge was angry at me, yelled at me in front of all of my coworkers because I messed up a key deliverable for one of our clients and we lost them. So this column now is representing what our part in it is. What is the behavior that I, or the person who's doing the inventory, what's my part? When my self-esteem, my looking good, my trust in others is affected, what did I do? What's my behavior? So thinking about my part in things. Where have I been selfish, dishonest, or frightened? Where was I to blame? How did I act? Did I criticize or complain about somebody? Did I judge them? Here's a big one. Did I withhold affection, attention, or avoid them? These people against whom I have resentment. Did I plan retaliation or revenge? Did I gossip? So these are all things, and there's many more, but these are just a small number of examples of things that I might do to somebody or something about whom I have resentment. Okay. So now that you've got 20 or 25 pages of people and things you have resentments against, we're going to look at fears. Fear is a huge driver of alcoholic behavior. Fear is a feeling of alarm or disquiet caused by the expectation of danger, pain, disaster, or the like. One of the biggest ones is being found out or being known for who you really are. You can imagine living a life of an alcoholic, or maybe just our lives as we're sitting here right now, really being found out for what we think about or who we really are. It's a fear that drives, I know it still drives me today. It's said that the driving force of most alcoholics, in the life of most alcoholics, is the self-centered fear that we will lose something we have, or that we will not get something we think we need or want. And we think about the root of all of these is generally self-centered fear. Self-centered fear is at the root of most of our problems. So now I'm afraid of Marge again. I'm afraid that she might fire me. And that's going to threaten my self-esteem, my relationships with my coworkers, maybe my spouse, my emotional security, my physical, material security, fear of losing something I have that I value, fear of not getting something I want, fear of someone finding out something that I'm hiding. And we go through the list. We list everything that we're afraid of, and what might have happened or might not have happened, how did it threaten me, and then generally it's something like, I fear I'm going to lose something that I think I need to hold on to, or I'm not going to get something that I want. We talk about sexual relationships. Oftentimes in the life of an alcoholic, there's some work to be done there. And then anyone that I haven't mentioned, people that I've hurt, I write down their name. I write down the cause, why I hurt them, how it affected me, and what my part is in it. You can imagine that this is a very scary proposition for a lot of people. And a lot of people will do steps 1, 2, and 3, and then they'll do steps 10, 11, and 12. And they will skip over this, because almost none of us liked the self-searching and the honesty with ourselves that's required to make this kind of list. It's really significant. So then there's the last call. After viewing your notebook, is there anything left? Anything that makes me feel uncomfortable in my memory that I have not yet written down? Reviewing everything I've written, all the people against whom I have resentments, all the fears I have, all my sexual behavior, all the people I've hurt in my life that I can remember. Is there anything else? It's pretty heavy. Because the next step is I get to share it. Step 5, admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Oops, what's happened here? Okay. This step is exactly that. It goes something like this. You find someone that you trust, could be your sponsor in the AA program, could be somebody else who is a trusted confidant like a priest or rabbi, anyone with whom you can have a confidential relationship. And then you take your notebook and you start on page 1 with the first line about my brother and how he smashed my birthday cake and it affected my self-esteem and my looking good. But you know what? I made fun of him in front of all my friends. And you talk about Marge, you talk about Bill and Jack and Fred and all the people and institutions against whom you have resentments. And you're sitting across the park bench from somebody and you start talking about your fears. What am I afraid of? Did something happen to me? Might something happen to me? How does it affect me? And then you talk about your sexual relationships. And then you talk about other people that you've hurt with another person. It sounds pretty heavy because it is. However, my experience has been that the person with whom I'm sharing that and the people that have shared with me these kinds of things, well, that's no big deal. You should have heard about what I did. And a story is told. And the heaviness comes down a little bit. And you can imagine what living a life ruled by resentment and fear and hurting other people, what it's like to share that with somebody else and not be struck by lightning. Not have the heavens come down. And in fact, somebody just kind of sitting across the table from you is saying, oh yeah, okay, what's next? What's next? What else do we have to talk about? This isn't really that big of a deal. And all those things that I've been carrying with me for so many years have been lifted off my shoulders. And if I've been really thorough, I'm starting to work on a new freedom and a new happiness. And so after step 5, it's recommended that you take some time. You actually go for a walk, go to the beach, find some quiet solitude. And I'll use the word bask. I'll use the word bask in that freedom for a few minutes. To have shared our deepest secrets, it's said that we're only as sick as our secrets. And to have shared those with somebody out loud, it's like walking through a curtain that's as thick as those light shades back there, and looking back and having it be completely transparent, because it was just about the stories I was telling myself about what happened. Now that I've shared those things, their power is dissipating. It's powerful. But we're just getting started, actually. Step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So, our inventory, the 4th step, and then sharing this as the 5th step, has established some patterns of behavior. That I'm now going to analyze. Examine the needs that appear most frequently in the 4th or 5th step. These are things like need for self-esteem, financial security, emotional security, physical security, ambition, looking good. So those are my needs. And what do I do when I don't get what I want? What's my behavior when I am not looking good, when somebody causes me to lose face or self-esteem? What are the things that I do? And then I distill all of that, those patterns of behavior. From taking the big inventory sheet, I then distill these into what we're going to call character defects, defects of character. and they look something like this. I'm just going to pick out a few of my favorites. Procrastinating, resentful, sullen, withdrawn, impatient, self-pitying, self-righteous. And so having done the inventory, that is, looked back over my whole life that I can remember, and looking for evidence of these character defects, it's right there in black and white in front of me now. I have looked back on my life and provided evidence that I have these defects of character. It isn't just like saying, oh, I lie every now and then. It's, I lied to my mom when I said I did my homework, or, it becomes real concrete. So we've created this body of evidence that we have these character defects. It's in our bodies now. And the good news is that along with this list, there's another list. The other side of them. And now we can begin to look at what might be different in our lives, how else we might behave. Being prompt instead of being procrastinating. Being positive in outlook. Being relaxed instead of uptight. Being loving instead of withdrawing affection. So now that we have looked at all of this evidence in our lives that we are then distilling into this list of defects of character, we now are beginning to embark on the opportunity to change those parts of our behavior, change those parts of our lives. Now, by the time you get done with all this work, I will say that you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Some big chunks of truth. So now what do? We've established these patterns of behavior. We've given them names. We know what they are. What do? We humbly asked him, referring to our higher power, to remove our shortcomings. Now that we've identified these patterns of behavior and named them, now you might say that we're ready to fix them. That would be impossible. If self-knowledge was all that was required, we would have taken care of this a long time ago. Because I lived it. Just knowing that this is the case, I can't fix it. But right now it's time to use our will in the proper way to ask our higher power to remove our shortcomings. So during this time, I have been hopefully practicing a little bit of the 11th step. This is pretty big now. We're talking about this is where we're really asking our higher power, asking God, asking the universe to help change our lives. And it goes something like this. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. There's a couple of notes in here. Please remove from me every single defect of character. You'll note that the period is not there. The period is after it says, that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So imagine this. It might be that some of my character defects serve a purpose in the lives of people around me. Maybe it serves only as a warning to teach them something, to serve some other purpose. So the idea here is that if I'm asking my higher power to remove my defects of character, I don't get to choose which ones get removed. I just get to pray that the ones that aren't useful get removed. Because I don't know. And by the way, this is not a one-time deal. People will say that their character defects have claw marks all over them. Because once you give them up, oh, there's that procrastination. Oh, I want to grab that one back. I want to procrastinate. So this is not like a one-time deal. This is part of the journey. And really the plea here, and the part that I love, is being useful to my higher power and to my fellows around me. Change me, mold me in the way that is best of service to you. I don't have the best idea. You have the best idea. Universe, you have the best idea. Here I am. Okay, can everybody stand up? Can you put your hand on the shoulder of the person next to you and say, good job?
Good job.
Very good job.
Good job.
Good job. Kim, you did a good job. Good job. Good job.
Did a great job.
Okay, great job. Please have a seat. Again, this is state change. So the last time we did a state change, it was right after we had turned our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And about 20 minutes later, we have now asked God to remove all the defects of character that we have evidenced through going back over our whole lives and distilled down into our character defects. We've now asked God to help remove those defects of character which stand in the way of my usefulness to me and my fellows. That's great. But so far we're only dealing with me. Step 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Another list of people, institutions that I had harmed. So this one is pretty straightforward. You're making a list. The person or institution that you harmed, the harm done, and the character defect that caused us to do the harm. These amends can generally be characterized in one of three ways. Amends I'm willing to make now, amends I'm not willing to make now, but maybe later, and the no way ones. The idea is that we go out to our fellows and repair the damage that we have done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Here are just some phrases that might help us when we think about people we've harmed. Instincts in collision, in which we cause damage to people. Misunderstanding, disgusted friends and employers. Children, sad wives and parents. Someone who smarts from our injustice. Damaged others who were still happily unaware of being hurt. These are all phrases that come from the big book and talk about the way that we've injured other people. So what might this look like? Well, who do we owe money to? Against whom have we committed crimes? Shorten our accounts, padding the expense account? Lying, cheating, stealing. Slander, antisocial behavior. So again, here we are. I'm going to make another list of my whole life. The people I have harmed. In the ways that I have been, because I've been, alcohol has ruled my life. It's ruled my life. I'm now not only going to list them, but I need to find the willingness to make amends to them. And a lot of times it's just being willing to be willing. Like asking for that. I might not be willing, but I'm willing to be willing. As long as it's not no, not never, there's a chance that we can make it through this. So, the way that I've suggested to do this is basically find a bunch of index cards and write the person's name down on it the offense, and how I was affected. Like what in me caused me to do that thing. You can imagine that stack of index cards gets pretty high. But as you can see, this is only a step about making the list and becoming willing to make amends. And here's the promise of step 8. If our manner is calm, frank, and open with people, we'll be gratified with the result. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the person you're talking to says, oh yeah, well, I shouldn't have done that. Or I admit my part in the thing. Feuds of years' standings melt away in an hour. Sometimes they will offer assistance. So again, we're making a big list of people that we had harmed, how we harmed them, and became willing to make amends to them all. You can imagine what step next is, step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So I'll go back here real quick. Some people read this and they say, I'm out of here. I have to do that. There's a reason why this is step 9 and not step 2. After having gone through the personal growth and the becoming dependent on a higher power, people will find the strength and courage to go to every single person that they can from their life and make an amends. So this is late in the process because we need to build our character before we go out and make these amends. Additionally, many of these people have probably heard something like this before. Oh, well, I'm so sorry for not making our appointment. My car ran out of gas and I had to siphon some gas from somebody else. I'm sorry I didn't make our date. I was busy at work. I was at the bar. Things like that. So people in our lives have heard all of these reasons and I'm sorry all the time. You'll note here it doesn't say to apologize. Right? The word is to make amends, which actually means to make it better. And so we're going to talk about this in just a second here. So why are we doing this? We're doing this to become of maximum service to our higher power and to our fellows. And so this is basically what we say. Hey Frank, I've been thinking about my life and I realize that I'm an alcoholic. And I'm not going to get over this until I talk to you about the things that I've done, and I just would like for you to listen. We're there to sweep off our, so I'm sorry, I'm going to go back from what I was saying to this slide right here. This is that not perfection part, so I'm going to go back to the slide. Sweeping off our side of the street. So we want to sweep our side of the street clean. We're not going to talk about how Fred smashed my birthday cake. I'm going to talk about, Fred, I'm sorry for making fun of you in front of all my friends. The birthday cake never enters into it because I'm talking about my side of the street. Oftentimes, other people have a part to play in these conflicts, in these resentments, in these hurts. But we're going to stick to my side of the street. When is making an amends not appropriate? Well, when to do so would injure them or others. So a lot of times, maybe in the sexual relationships inventory, in other types of relationships, it's better to just not go back there and reopen that wound. But I don't get to choose that. I'm working with somebody who's done this before, and so I get to talk with them and ask them, hey, should I go and make this amends with XYZ person? And they'll say, yes, you should, or no, you shouldn't. I can't trust myself in this area. So if there's ever a question about whether this would injure someone else by making this amends, I need to ask somebody about it. It's a positive change, not simply an apology. So this is kind of how it goes. You might imagine that before talking with somebody about the harm you've caused, you want to pray. Well, this is a great time to pray. Generally, the Serenity Prayer, something like that. Hey Fred, I'm doing some work on myself. I'm looking at my past and you're part of that. I'd like to share some things with you, but please let me talk until I'm done and then I'll let you talk. And then you tell your side of the story. Now, this is awkward and uncomfortable. But in the last hour, we've changed a lot as a human being. And generally, the person I'm speaking with, who's known me for all this time, will have noticed something about that. I will have changed my demeanor. I will have changed my words. I will have changed as a person. And so now when I'm coming here to talk with this person about me smashing or me making fun of them in front of all my friends, I'm different. And they're more likely to listen to what I have to say and not dismiss it. So then I lay it out there. I lied. I cheated. I stole. Those are big ones, and they happen in every alcoholic's life. How much, when, this is what I remember. You're sitting across from the person that you did this to. You're basically spilling your guts. I did this thing. But it's important to not have kind of an attitude of being less than, because I'm cloaked with my higher power now. I'm doing this so that I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows. And what I'm doing is I'm taking these things that I've been carrying with me my whole life and I'm removing them. I'm taking them out. By the way, people generally start with the easy ones. Mom, I'm really sorry. And generally it kind of goes, it's okay. And then you ask if you've missed anything. And sometimes they will be ready to tell all the things that you have missed about the things that you did. Oh, well, you don't remember the time where blah, 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 blah. Yes. And one is suggested to sit there and listen and receive all of that. All of that. And then once you've received all of that, the question is, how can I make this right? How can I make this better? And generally, someone who you owe money to, you're going to have some money. Here's my first payment. Here's the whole amount. There are sometimes going to be people that you can't make an amends to, or are maybe it's somebody who's deceased or has moved out of the area. There could be some substitutions for amends. You can write a letter and burn it and throw it in the ocean, or make a contribution to a charity along those lines. There are ways to complete this if the other person is not available. And you don't have to promise anything to them. You just have to listen. It's not necessary to tell the person you're doing this to stay sober, or to stress the spiritual aspects of your intention, or to apologize for your actions. This is what I did. How can I make it right? And oftentimes, it's a living amends, especially if this is someone who's close to you. The way in which I might be different with my family might be enough. It might be, wow, we're so happy with the life that you're living right now, just keep it up. That's the best thing you can do, just keep it up. Maybe it's, well, yeah, man, I'm never going to forgive you for that. Okay? There's nothing you can do. Okay? I got my side of the street clean. I fessed up to what happened. I can't take responsibility for the other person's actions or for how they react. I'm here to deliver the truth to that person. So as you can imagine, someone who has lived their life in the alcoholic way and is now making an amends to the people that they've hurt along the way after having swallowed and digested those big chunks of truth about themselves, some things might be happening to them as a person, as a spiritual being that's become unburdened by all of these stories and things that have happened. They've been transformed. The past has changed as a result of doing this work. And so now we're going to talk about the promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Those are some pretty great results, I think, of a program of action. And it happens every day. But the key is in that last line. They will always materialize if we work for them. And some people might say that doing all of these steps might be a lot of work. Might be a lot of work. It's also been phrased that this is freedom. Through the doing of this, we become free from our selfishness, from our self-centeredness, from the prison of our past behavior and activity. We no longer have to be that person. We no longer have to have that behavior. We can be free. And for me, that's what the promises are all about, is that spiritual freedom. But you'll note that we have 3 more steps to go, because now we're on step 10. So after having made those amends now, the amends process continues until the amends are made. And when I recommend people use a stack of index cards, maybe that's one a week, maybe that's one every few days, maybe the stack of index cards sits there for a while. We're not going to rest on our laurels, because we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. The object of this step is to practice changing our behavior, substituting positive behaviors for negative ones. So on a daily basis, we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. Because you can imagine that these pathways, these responses, these habits are still there. And believe me, I'm still going to get a little bit irritated when that person does not move over on the freeway when they're in the fast lane. So when I feel that thing come up, oh God, okay, please, I need some patience right now. And if it's something big, I might take it to my sponsor, who's also working with me. We're going to talk about sponsorship in a few minutes. And then if we've harmed someone, we make amends, a little amends. Or actually, it's whatever it is, whatever it happens to be. We're going to continue to use the tools that we've learned to not put anything back in the backpack. That is, I'm not going to carry that resentment or that harm that I have created now by my behavior. When something was threatened, I behaved in a certain way. I don't want to carry that around with me, so as soon as I can, I'm making amends for that. Love and tolerance of others is our code. For alcohol is a subtle foe. Despite all this work, we are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. A daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Hey God, how can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. This is the proper use of the will, to put ourselves in a position of service. to others in our family, to other alcoholics, to people in our workplaces, in our community. This is the proper use of the will. At the end of the day, we constructively review our day. So this can be something that's written, it can be something that's just the end of the day, we take a look. Was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do I owe someone an apology? Do I need to make an amends? Do I need to talk with something about this with my sponsor? Were we kind and loving toward all? So on a daily basis, not only as we go through life, but at the end of the day, we do a roll-up of the whole activities of all the day. Where was I selfish? Where was I resentful? Where was I dishonest? And it's only this kind of behavior that will keep us from slipping back into our old patterns. So we must constantly be renewing and reviewing and honing our service, our fitness for service. And then we ask God's forgiveness and ask about what corrective action we might take. Asking my sponsor, asking somebody, hey, how can I make this better? So we think about, basically the idea is we're moving from selfishness to other-centeredness. You might call it God's will, you might call it being in harmony with the universe. But really this is a conscious effort to move from self-will into God's will, or working for others. And so we think about, where was I impatient? Where was I angry? Oh, those are the same two columns. See? Progress, not perfection. There's supposed to be another column over there. Notice that. Okay, so this is basically a little bit of maintenance now. Having done all this work and continuing to do my amends, I'm going to continue to take that personal inventory on a daily basis, so as to keep in that fit spiritual condition that will keep me away from taking the next drink. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for His will for us and the power to carry that out. So as we go through life, we certainly need to enlarge our spirituality, and meditation does not mean, like, there's been a lot of addition to meditation in the West since this book was written. Meditation in the 1920s might have been more along the lines of contemplation, thinking about things. We are so lucky to have different traditions and other ways of expanding our spiritual consciousness and connection with the universe, our higher power, and our fellows. And so that's the idea, is that we will constantly improve our conscious contact, because without it, I will probably go back into some of that old behavior, and then those things keep getting back in the backpack. I carry them around with me, and I might want some relief from all that pain that I'm feeling right now, because I've added a whole bunch of resentments and harms to people in my life. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. So in the morning, we're going to start our day with God consciousness, asking to be put in a position of service. Inspiration. Relaxing, taking it easy. Shown what our next step is to be, especially for freedom from self-will. We're careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. And I think there's a lot of power in that, because I don't really know what's best for me, but the universe will bring it to me if I allow myself to be open to that. If others will be helped though, like maybe a prayer I said before coming up here, I can pray for that, and that's going to be okay. So again, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, "Thy will be done." Step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. One might imagine that having actually gone through and done all this work, that you might have a spiritual awakening. Yes, it says it right here, having had, this is what happens when this work is done. Carrying the message and practicing the principles in all our affairs. A spiritual awakening, a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. If you do this work, that's what's going to happen. Carrying the message to alcoholics, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. Carry the message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. That's part of going to meetings. It's part of being a sponsor. It's part of showing up and doing the right thing. I can say that this is true for me. That nothing like sharing this work with someone who is suffering from pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. There's nothing finer that I've found in my life than doing that with another person. So talking about sponsorship here real quick. Maybe you've heard of sponsorship. So that's a special relationship between two people who are in recovery. What it was like, what happened, and what's it like now. The idea is that to have a relationship with someone in your life who has been what you've gone through what you are going through and has done the work that you have done. They are not a marriage and family therapist. They are not a banker. They are not somebody who's going to advise you on your career. They are not somebody who is going to tell you what to eat for dinner. What they will do is they will share the experience, strength, and hope that they have acquired by doing the steps and sharing it with other people. And so here it says, your job now, once you have, okay, I'm going to go the one before. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. Must. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. And your job now is to be at the place where you may be of maximum helpfulness to others. So that's the job. Once one has gone through the steps, one could say, find God, clean house, help others. Is kind of the short version of what we've been talking about for the last 90 minutes. Oh my goodness. I think I'm going to move now. Yes. I'm going to move now. So everybody close your eyes. And imagine what that's like. To have lived a life of selfishness and self-centeredness. To have moved through the stories and what really happened in your life, the part you had to play in it. And having all of that relieved. And now, your job is to share what you have with other people who are also suffering. Okay, you can open your eyes. And that is, Joe, that's the deal.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah. I'm going to go really quickly here through the 12 traditions. Essentially, we talk about AA groups, and just like there are 12 steps for the individual, there are traditions for the group. Many people, when they think about AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they think about AA groups and meetings and things like that, because that's kind of the most outward, that's the thing that gets represented in movies, that's the things that people talk about. And so there's a couple here that I love. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. You don't have to be sober to be a member of AA. And people generally, they can come back again and again and again, and they're welcome with open arms. A note here, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. The idea there is that it was decided very early on that sponsorship and helping people with the work of Alcoholics Anonymous should not be paid. That could introduce some very challenging dynamics when you have someone that you're paying for this kind of work. So they decided that was a bad idea. Excuse me. All right. We're coming to a close here. This is slide 3 of 75. 73 of 75. And this passage here from the Big Book is often read at the end of meetings, and I think I'd like to share it here because I think it encapsulates very well what the program is all about. If you'd like to, you may close your eyes, otherwise you can read along. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Well, that was truly a delight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian.
And I think it was, wow, 90 minutes.
Yes.
Right on time.
I had so many questions while you were speaking, and but I'm sure others do. So let's have questions. Yes.
Can I start?
Do we have a microphone?
I have
Or
a couple of questions.
do you want
First,
people
you
to
know,
wait
this-
for a microphone, Robert?
Oh, I don't need the mic, I don't think.
Well, we're
Well, for the sake
recording
of the
it.
recording.
Oh,
It's better if we
okay.
actually record it.
I'll try and keep them soft. Soft questions. There's 4 other programs in the world, some of them much older than AA, most of them. And they have great success rates. AA has not a great success rate. And my concern, because of the social responsibility your group has, that there's no real attempt to modify or adapt or evolve to really take care of the job at hand. Because I come from Los Angeles, I've seen 30,000 people on the streets that are sociopaths and are oblivious to this 12 steps you're talking about. But are you aware of the other programs that there are for alcoholism?
Yes, so I've become aware of different programs about alcoholism, and there are some that work for many other people.
Well, the first one that I've encountered historically is the Prophet Muhammad in 600 AD.
Okay.
What he has to say about alcohol is maybe a couple paragraphs. It's profound beyond anything that we encounter unless you seek it out.
Hmm.
The other one that's interesting is King George I in London in 1721. His program went 2 ways. You put him in the Royal Navy, or you send him to America and dump him. And that's what they did with alcoholics, and they had plenty of melodies. He thinks these are not mysterious results from introducing gin into Western civilization.
Hmm.
It was catastrophic in England. Catastrophic here now. That's the big worry. The other one is Joseph Smith in the Words of Wisdom from 1833. His pamphlet, which is not as nearly as involved as that book, is basically the same thing. Maybe it was a roadmap for Bill W., but it's about 2-3 pages of advice and
Okay.
information on it. It's worth checking out. Any of us should know that. The other one is the DSM-3 or the DSM-4 or the DSM-5.
Manuals.
You know about those?
Diagnostic manuals, yeah.
Yeah, they use those in the treatment centers now, like Tarzana Treatment in Los Angeles County and I think Ventura County.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, ultimately, is there a social responsibility for AA to improve their success rate? To keep up with the job? Because you do have your organization has is kind of the only thing that's out there. Institutionally, that's what they give you after you go into a treatment program, they start doing that.
Yeah.
But the success rate, honestly, in the best numbers, is about 8 to 12%. And then the people go back to alcohol.
Yeah. Well, certainly not being a representative of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I can say only that I've seen all kinds of people come into AA meetings, professionals, people who slept in the bushes, and a lot of them don't make it.
Yeah.
And hard for me to say why. I feel very fortunate, you know, to know people who got it. And I don't know in terms of a social responsibility, you know, AA has always been about attraction rather than promotion. And it's just very hard for me to comment on anything globally except to say that there are lots of other programs and ways of becoming sober. And if somebody else can use a pamphlet from, you know, the 1800s or 1700s, or, you know, go to the Prophet Muhammad and take what he has and change their lives, my hats are off to them.
It seems that it's always based in that inner work that the person's willing to do. Boy, there's a lot of work involved. So impressive. And anytime there's a lot of work, people are going to.
Things must have really changed, because whenever I look up on the internet, I haven't done it for several years, but AA had the best rate of anybody else, so these
8 to
are weird
12%.
statistics.
8 to
I'm
12%
just saying.
is
Yeah,
NPR.
I don't remember what it is, but
Yeah.
it used to be
NBC.
the most effective treatment, but anyway,
Other questions?
other question.
Jenny?
You know, it's
Jenny
sort of
does.
like, I just feel like we watched, Death of a Salesman. It was kinda like devastating.
Jenny has a
I have
question.
a simple,
I think it'll pick it up either way, yeah.
my question's simple, it's just, when you got down to those, like, 500 cards that you have to write out and think about your whole life and all those categories, it started to be a little overwhelming, and I wondered, do people get really bummed out with the prospect, or is it the fact that they get busy on it, they kinda enjoy, that somehow they get going with it?
Yeah.
Cause I was thinking I might get bummed out.
Yeah, it can be a bummer to relive or to bring those things back up. And that's why having a relationship with somebody who has gone through the work is really important, and staying in touch with that person on a regular daily basis, because the feelings do come up. And the good news is that, at least in my experience, once they come up and then I share them with somebody else, I don't have to feel them again because they've been relieved. Yeah, so it is very challenging. The work is very challenging, and there is a big support system that can be in place, that is in place for that. And I might make one comment on that. So when thinking about making the big lists of resentments and fears and things like that, people can go too far. People can go and write hundreds of pages, just for an example. The idea is to do enough to establish the pattern. That is, if I can go back far enough and in detail enough to establish the pattern of selfishness and self-centeredness that gets manifested in many different ways, then that can be enough. I don't want to say that it's hard for me to say who might go, how far is too far? Well, it's far enough for you at the time that you're doing it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, because it brought up so many things. And the question I have, or the perspective you might want to comment on, is that most people have some kind of addiction. And it might not be alcohol, and it might not be so severe that you're in rock bottom, but it could be dysfunctional. And it can, to others, as well steps is quite helpful, because one can kind of inventory what one's own addiction or compulsiveness is. And I think compulsiveness, really adds to the selfishness, it fires up that selfishness. So my question is, any thoughts about how others who are addicted to other things, or just to cell phone use, on all kind of distractions, if not addictions, do you have any knowledge or any comments about how you see this applying to others?
It's a great question. I will reiterate that I'm just a guy sitting up here with an opinion, right? This is definitely not any kind of official opinion of anybody except for me. I've often thought that this would be a great program for those people who are really challenging in my life. And there are a number of other anonymous programs out there that use different bases for food or for drugs or for sex or for gambling, those kind of very big compulsions where someone has lost the ability to control. They basically are out of control in that particular behavior. And I think that what makes Alcoholics Anonymous so unique is that if you don't figure it out, you're either going to die or you're going to go to an institution or jail. So to do this kind of work is fueled by the alternative. That is, if one does not figure out the alcohol problem, projecting down the road, you just hear about it. It's death, institutions, or jail. So live life on a spiritual basis is basically door number 2, becomes more tenable. And to do the work, because it is very hard when you're doing it, is fueled in part by that those 2 alternatives. I think that to some extent we are all slaves to our compulsions, whatever they might be. And the extent to which this kind of work is required to be relieved of that slavery, that mental slavery, that emotional, physical slavery, probably just depends on what the consequences are. If the consequences are bad enough to do this kind of work in that context, then certainly I imagine that it could be relieved. Because when I think about compulsive behavior, I'm generally running away from something or trying to hide from something. And this is all about bringing all of that to light, shining a light on it, and then being relieved of it.
What comes to mind, based on your question, having gone to Al-Anon meetings that are based on this, but sort of tangential to alcohol itself. You come out of, the first time I went to an Al-Anon meeting, I thought, I'm here to learn how to live with an alcoholic. But that's not what Al-Anon is about. It's about those very same 12 steps, I think, but one word is different. And if you start going to Al-Anon meetings, you come out thinking everyone would benefit from this. The whole world should go to Al-Anon meetings, because whether it's alcohol or how I relate to the person that I'm irritated at work about, it's sort of about this level of self-improvement that everyone would benefit from, whether it's cell phone or anger or alcohol or anything. So in my experience, not having the specific addiction, but having those same 12 steps turned toward self-improvement for self-improvement's sake is what Al-Anon is about.
Thank you, Brian. I don't specifically remember saying, what is it all about?
Oh no, the quote was, I don't get it.
What's remarkable is the way you've presented this so clearly is there, The problem isn't, you've made it clear that the problem isn't the alcohol is an attempt to cope with a lot of subconscious or repressed psychological material. And it seems to me the program has a great faith in the light. That is, if a person can become aware of a lot of pain, a lot of unassimilated experience, then the compulsive behaviors we have to cover it up or distract ourselves or make ourselves more comfortable, we can then deal with those. But we can't deal with those as long as there's all that in the dark. And I think that's kind of brilliant and remarkable, and you've presented a model that could be a model for any sort of self-study. You know, Pythagorean self-study. Pythagoras was famous for saying, you know, before you go to sleep, review your day. And I'm sure Pythagoras would be sitting in the front row there to see the detail with which you've presented this. But wouldn't you say there seems to be this psychology about the subconscious or the unconscious that Bill W. and Dr. Bob, we haven't mentioned Dr. Bob, but how they were savvy about that somehow.
Yeah, I think that the allergy model around alcoholism being an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. So it's kind of that two parts to alcoholism, and that one does not experience the allergy until one decides to pick up alcohol. So the problem with the alcoholic definitely resides in the mind. And so even knowing all of the consequences that will generally follow from someone who has that advanced of an allergy, there is still a compulsion to go forward and have the first drink. And so yes, I think it very much has to do with that subtle psychology, the resentment, that is the tapes that I play over and over in my head, and alcohol becomes a tool oftentimes to manage that. Some people who talk about alcohol say that I felt really uncomfortable in my own skin until I had my first drink. And all of a sudden I had this ease and comfort that allowed me to act socially, have confidence, feel good about what's going on. And so if it weren't for the negative consequences of that is the continued craving and the allergy, sure, somebody could have a drink or two, feel really good, and put half of a drink down and leave Harry's, you know, no problem. But for the person who has a compulsion, they don't leave that alone. So yes, I think it's tied in there with the allergy. So the two is like the yin and the yang of it. Yeah. And I agree that when it comes to freedom from our past, and specifically around the egoic self and trying to, and basically being ruled by our past, this is a great way to become free from that. And there are plenty of other challenges that come along, but this is good. This program is good for the freedom from that compulsive behavior, freedom from the addiction.
Okay, we're gonna draw this meeting to a close.
Okay.
Do you wanna just mention our next program?
I have one question, may I? It's
This clock says
8:53.
8:53.
This one says 8:53. We're going with it.
I'm going to allow
Okay.
a
Thank
question.
you.
We have a vote at 8.
Yes. Oh, and that will take time. Okay. Well, just the higher power, you said some people might think of it as a group, or you know, like the group is my higher power. Does that last all through 12 steps, or does that feeling evolve?
So I can only speak from my own experience. I think the idea is that through the work of the steps, and especially the 11th step, the prayer and meditation, the understanding of my higher power, or of one's higher power, can and should evolve through experience and learning new things. This is kind of, one might say this is like spiritual kindergarten, in that we're just trying to get to that place where we can then, you know, embark upon the great journey of life and of exploration and things like that. So I think for some people it probably does, and I would imagine that things change over time. Yeah, and I think that that's welcome and encouraged.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have our vote of thanks, and before we do, I'll just mention next meeting of the Institute of World Culture will be the Founding Day talk on Saturday, July 6th at 2 o'clock here. It's on William Penn's Vision of Cultural Conscience. It's the Founding Day address for the Institute of World Culture, and everybody's warmly welcome to attend. Also, I just wanted to mention before we hear the vote of thanks that the Institute is self-supporting through donations, and there is a table back there where those could be given if you'd like. And please go to the worldculture.org website for more information. Now we'll hear our vote of thanks.
Well, we want to thank you very much for coming and for volunteering your time to do this. I think in most authentic spiritual traditions is the spirit of volunteerism, and that money isn't a factor. It's actually an unhealthy way to bring spiritual knowledge. So I think Joe gave the vote of thanks already, and I couldn't do better. But a couple of things which have come out here. You've given us kind of a universal picture of a spiritual path. And it's in every tradition all over the world. Every great teacher, true teacher, outlines these same basic ideas. Craving, that's the main factor in the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. And craving is addiction. So that I found really fascinating. I appreciated when you first came in, I appreciated your very direct smile, and that you look a person right in the eyes, and that it takes a lot of courage to do what you've done in your life, and is a real model and example for all of us. It's a totally overwhelming task, but you pointed out really clearly that it's a process of self-transformation. That's another aspect of all true spiritual paths. From moving from a narrow, limited sense of ourself to an expanded, universal, and more united, interdependent sense of ourself. You began with gratitude. That's a core to all spiritual traditions. Gratitude to our preceptors, our teachers, everyone that we've benefited from in our lives. And the goal is absolutely classic. The Bodhisattva path in Buddhism, for instance, to humbly serve others. And that acknowledges, again, the interdependence of all of life. So we want to thank you so much for bringing that to us on a Saturday evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful vote of thanks. That's
Brian, that was great. We used to sing together. Yeah, it's great.